Order 66, also known as the Great Jedi Purge, was a directive issued by Chancellor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, during the end of the Clone Wars. It was a contingency plan, embedded within the inhibitor chips of each of the clones of the Grand Army of the Republic. When executed, Order 66 marked all the Jedi as traitors of the Republic and instructed the clones to immediately eliminate them. This order was a crucial component of Palpatine's plan to get rid of the Jedi Order and become Emperor of the Galaxy, the final piece of the Sith Grand Plan. We first saw this in 2005's Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, but since, it's featured across various animated and live-action projects, and with that came an increasing number of confirmed survivors. So here is the 2024 updated list of every Jedi who survived Order 66. There's a lot to get through, but we're going to begin with the obvious ones, Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They both went into hiding after a meeting with Bail Organa to discuss the plan for their respective exiles. Yoda went to Dagobah, living a life of seclusion and keeping a low profile until he meets Luke in The Empire Strikes Back. Obi-Wan Kenobi took on the identity of Ben and settled in the desert planet of Tatooine, where he watched over and protected Luke. Apart from 1 or 2 missions, he remained in hiding and kept his identity a secret until the time was right to train Luke and guide the boy on his journey to becoming a Jedi Knight and eventually redeem Anakin, his dad. On to our next survivor, Ahsoka. The Padawan of Anakin Skywalker left the Jedi Order during the Clone Wars Season 5. She was drawn back into Jedi affairs by Season 7 when she returned to participate in the Siege of Mandalore. Ahsoka was on her way to deliver a captured Maul to the Jedi Council on Coruscant when Anakin fell to the dark side and she sensed something was wrong. She went on to help the rebellion and survive well into the New Republic. Our next Jedi is Barriss Offee. She was in prison during Order 66. Having turned to the dark side and framed Ahsoka for a heinous crime, she watched the Jedi Temple burn behind bars. But when the Empire came to power, she was let out, on the condition she would train to become an Inquisitor. But having passed the trials, she witnessed the atrocities and intimidation the Empire was imposing on everyone in the galaxy, and the sheer level of brutality turned her back to the light. Years later, having left the Imperial regime behind, she became known as a Jedi healer in exile. She assisted those in need, and became close friends with a small ragtag group who followed her with great admiration. She also advised about Force-sensitive children. She was accidentally impaled by Lynn, the 4th sister, but it's uncertain if Barriss is alive. Time will tell. Fans have expressed a deep desire to see her reunite with Ahsoka later in the timeline. And that brings us on to the Inquisitors. There are many of them. The Grand Inquisitor, who was a former Jedi Temple guard. The Padawan's true name is unknown. He is only referred to by his title. Introduced in the first season of the animated show Star Wars Rebels, he is a striking, menacing figure pursuing surviving Jedi. His abilities in the Force were some of the best in the Empire, which is why Vader favoured him. Then we have Reva Savanda, the 3rd sister, an Inquisitor who turned back to the light, but whose fate is unknown. The 3rd sister was introduced in Obi-Wan Kenobi, an ambitious, vengeful Inquisitor whose only motive was to kill Darth Vader, who slaughtered all of her fellow younglings back during the time of the Jedi Temple. Then there is Marrok, one of the characters in the Ahsoka show, a mysterious mercenary from Morgan Elsbeth, revived by Night Sister magic, but as we saw in Tales of the Empire once upon a time, he served Darth Vader. Next we have the 5th brother, another character introduced in Star Wars Rebels, but made his live-action transition in the Kenobi show. Unlike the Grand Inquisitor, the 5th brother didn't care about finesse. He used his size and brute strength to his advantage in various conflicts. Then we have the 2nd sister, Trilla Suduri, former Padawan of Cere Junda, introduced in Jedi Fallen Order. Trilla fell to the dark side after feeling betrayed by her master, and spoiler warning, as we see at the end of the game, she is killed by Darth Vader. Then we have the 9th sister, a character of tragic origins. Despite her natural Dawitin strength, her real power came in the form of reading minds. Next up we have the 7th sister, a Mirialan, the same species as Barriss, a persistent antagonist of Star Wars Rebels Season 2, along with her partner, the 5th brother. The 7th sister was vying to become the next Grand Inquisitor, and she had a terrifying and malicious presence. Next we have the fourth sister, who also defected, as we saw at the end of Tales of the Empire. She's also a character who appeared in Obi-Wan Kenobi. A mentor to Barriss, Lyn Rakish, which is her real name, only performed atrocious acts, like many of the Inquisitors, to stay in the good graces of Lord Vader. She describes not having a choice, because as the Grand Inquisitor said, there are fates worse than death. Then we have the ominous eighth brother, an Inquisitor many fans assumed was Marrok, but they're really not the same person. But one thing we know for sure is he was a Torellian Django jumper, a tall humanoid species known for their acrobatics. Next we have one of the more despicable members of the Inquisitorius, the sixth brother. He first appeared in the 2016 Ahsoka novel, and was later expanded in the comics. Once known as Bill Baylan, he was an overconfident bully who would intimidate his fellow Inquisitors. An unarmed Ahsoka Tano was able to kill him, and he's the person whose lightsaber crystals were purified by Ahsoka before using them for her own dual blades. Next we have the 10th brother, someone who lost faith in the Jedi Order long ago. He didn't like that the so-called peacekeepers were now soldiers for a corrupt republic. Next up, the 13th sister. The story of Iskat Akaris is told in the novel Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. Knighted after the Battle of Geonosis, she proved an unstable Jedi Knight, simply due to her natural connection to the dark side. Palpatine deliberately manipulated her, encouraging her to distrust the Jedi, in a similar way he did to Anakin. And then we have her lover, Tualon Yaluna. His full story is an entire mystery, but as far as Inquisitors go, he certainly had a soft side. He was part of the mission to hunt down Koth, but was targeted by Darth Vader for having a relationship with Iskat. Next up we have the Inquisitor who is unnamed, who appeared in both Tales anthology shows. Our next survivor is mentioned in the E.K. Johnston novel Crimson Climb. Another unnamed Inquisitor. It was Kira who discovered her body. Another Inquisitor is Jacera, a Dathomirian female who was taken from Dathomir and trained to become an Inquisitor. She eventually killed her master and became a mercenary in search of more power. There is very little information about this one, but she first appears in Ghosts of Dathomir. She was known to have terrifying visions of the future, and was able to see into the mind of her opponents. So back to some actual Jedi. Cere Junda, one of the few survivors of Order 66 captured by the Empire at the time, but later escaped. Cere broke under torture, giving up her Padawan. Sometime after Trilla's transformation into the second sister, which we just spoke about, she was brought in to mock Cere's failure as a Jedi. Overflowing with rage and regret, Cere tapped into the dark side and killed almost everyone in the room before she escaped. She cut herself off from the Force, but as we see in Jedi Survivor, she was essential in helping the hidden Jedi path. Junda would meet her fate, fighting Darth Vader. Next up we have Rahm Kota from The Force Unleashed, but who made a canon debut through a mention in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Moving on, Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos. The Bad Batch Season 3 confirmed Asajj Ventress somehow survived her assumed death in Dark Disciple, and we know Quinlan Vos also survived, as we know from the Kenobi show. Then of course the hero of the Jedi games, Cal Kestis, the Padawan of Jaro Tapal, the Lasat's Jedi Master, was able to protect Cal long enough for him to escape the planet of Bracca. Then of course we have Taron Malicos, a loved and trusted Jedi General during the Clone War, first introduced in Jedi Fallen Order. After he was able to strike down his clone troopers, he crash-landed onto Dathomir, the home of the Night Sister Witches, and there he met Merrin. He told her the Jedi were responsible for the genocide of her sisters, and promised her revenge if she taught him the secrets of Night Sister magic. So when Cal Kestis goes to Dathomir and learns of Malicos' deceit, the two dueled until Merrin used her magic to entomb Malicos in the ground. Next up, another character from Jedi Fallen Order, Eno Cordova, introduced in the first game in 2019. He was Cere Junda's master when she was a Padawan. As a scholar, Cordova dedicated himself to studying the ancient Zepho civilizations. He was later cut down by his friend, Bode Akuna, who is our next member, a Jedi spy who fell to the dark side. Then we have Jedi who initially survived Order 66, but were later hunted down. As I said, Koth, but also Jedi librarian Jocasta Nu, one of my favourite Jedi of all time, who did her best to preserve Jedi archives and keep the Order alive. she held on to a wealth of knowledge and holocrons, with plans to start a new Jedi school. She crossed paths with the Grand Inquisitor, told Darth Vader to his face she knew he was Anakin, and well, she was brutally murdered. Luminara Unduli, the master of Barriss Offee, another character who initially survived in Kashyyyk, but was later arrested, and whose remains were used as a trap to lure in Jedi like Canon and Ezra. Kanan Jarrus is the next one, and we saw how he survived Order 66 in the Bad Batch Season 1, later being essential to the Rebel Alliance. Then we come on to Nari, a human Jedi who survived 9 years after Order 66 before being killed and strung up on Tatooine after looking for Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Inquisitors found him. And how can we forget Gungi, someone whose fate is unknown. He appeared in the Bad Batch Season 2 but was left on Kashyyyk. Then we have some Jedi who were listed in the comics but were never followed up on: Oppo Rancisis, Coleman Cage, Carmoon Coley, and Selrak Elus. Next up we have Kirak Infil'a, not an active member during the time of Order 66, but rather took a monkish vow, the vow of Barash. He sensed Order 66, but chose not to step out of the shadows. He was still hunted down and killed by Darth Vader soon after Revenge of the Sith. Then we have Naq Med, another Jedi who left the Order before Order 66. He left the Jedi and started a family. Then, my dear friends, we have Ferren Barr, the Padawan who learnt too much. He was very clever, and when he was cornered by clone troopers, he reinitiated Order 66 on Inquisitors around him. But of course, like so many others, he was killed by Darth Vader. Then we have Millie Alibeth and Vivert Stagg, who knew Anakin Skywalker. This is mentioned in Brotherhood by Mike Chen, also in Hyperspace Stories issue number 4. Then we have Zubain Ankonori, a Zabrak Jedi mentioned in Star Wars Uprising, slain by the Inquisitorius. Next up we have Kelleran Beq, portrayed by Ahmed Best and featured in Mando Season 3. This Jedi, who we first saw in Jedi Temple Challenge, took Grogu from the Jedi Temple, called upon the Naboo Guard, and took Grogu to safety where he was hidden. At the time of making this video, we don't know the full story yet, and that brings us on to Grogu. He was hidden. We assume those who hid him were killed, because somewhere along the way before The Mandalorian Season 1, he ends up on Arvala 7, alone and afraid. And as Ahsoka Tano said in Mando Season 2, his mind went dark, and he cut himself off from the Force. But now he's a Mandalorian apprentice in training. And of course, who can forget? Dark Jedi, Baylan Skoll, a respected Jedi General during the Clone Wars, and someone who knew Anakin. His story will continue in Ahsoka Season 2, despite the late great Ray Stevenson's tragic passing. His obsession with ending what he calls the cycle and his pursuit of power linked to the Mortis gods is going to make for a fascinating second season if they choose to recast. And his apprentice Shin Hati, who probably wasn't a Jedi during the time of Order 66, she would have been too young. And finally, my dear friends, the most recent unnamed Jedi from Tales of the Empire. So then we have a couple of late additions to this list. The mysterious Force user Jod Nar Narwood from Skeleton Crew. We will know nothing about his character until December 3rd, so if you're watching this after 2024, I suppose you already know. And the second one is Tenzu Run, a survivor in the Inquisitors comics. I made an entire video about him, check out the link in the pinned comment. There are many others suspected to have survived Order 66, but their stories are either unfinished or uncertain. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who is your favourite known survivor of the Great Jedi Purge? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, and may the Force be with you, always.